week's project. And there's a couple ways to do it. I'll review the Vanishing Point thing, and in the process I'll show Gladys the spotlight trick so that works. And then I'll show you how to tackle something just from imagery and not necessarily do a fancy blocky thing. So depending on the kind of imagery you're using for the shot, you might do one of two approaches. Let's actually, hopefully we get some web here. Show you, it occurs to me that I don't have the video, but I can show you. Good old E.com. Show it to you on the reel here, perhaps.
Question?
Sure.
For this 2.5D shot, does it have to be something that is like moving towards us, or can we have it be something that like in your example, the walls were kind of moving closer to us? Is it okay if we have like the image kind of moving farther back away from us?
Whatever gives you parallax. And parallax is the illusion that things that are close to you are moving faster than things that are farther away. So a push or a pull is probably not as dramatic as like a little dolly around. So here's an example of one that's I think just a push in on this subsequent shot here. So this guy, and it's just real subtle, but you get each one of those is its own layer, and that's a straight push in. It's kind of a multi-plane animation look. You know, it's not necessarily. I don't know if this shot right here, this has got that method, but the camera's not moving very far. So mountains, distant mountains are one layer, castles and its mountain is another layer, and the little fog banks are their own layer. Yeah, camera's moving a little bit. You can see the parallax there. But that one's pretty easy because it's all flat stuff. What I showed last time, the Vanishing Point, gets a little bit more complicated because you're building sort of these little sets, and the sets themselves might not be oriented to camera very effectively. So I want to show that too, on the off chance that something comes in kind of spun, how you reorient it. And if you want to combine multiple Vanishing Point projects, you can do that too. There's a couple of little tricks to make that happen. But something like this is the easiest. And essentially we're taking Photoshop and we're going to, that's fine. It's way too big. We're taking separate layers, like here's my mountains, here's my mid-ground mountains with the castle on it, and here's a smoke, and here's a smoke. And those get stacked in 3D in After Effects, and that gives us our opportunity to move the camera in that space, which gives it the illusion of depth. And it actually, it's not an illusion, it really has depth. These things are farther back than the next thing up. So that's the easiest way to go, and this wouldn't take very long to set up. I mean, essentially you're making layered documents anyway, and like the Z-depth project, you're making selections based on how far away from camera is it. So if you're in that mode of thinking, it's a pretty easy step to do the next thing. So let me take as an example this little piece here, which has got some layers, but not much. So I got a deep background. If I wanted to just move the camera here, the building would look like a card. I wouldn't be able to move that camera very far before the illusion was broken. So a better approach would be to break this up based on things that are close to camera. Unfortunately, this is all connected. So this really has to be one, and maybe the dome is another. So on its own layer, select it. Oh, I hate this. Sorry. It's the devil lasso. Devil's lasso. It's a piece of junk. It is. Let me just get that out of there, paste that in, and it gets its own separate layer. So that when you're in the software, and this is all properly set up and nice and clean, you get a little parallax between the dome and the foreground there. So that's one method. Let's just entertain that for a second. So we'll do the following. Let's make this actually back a step. There we go. Let's apply this mask. Let's do a better selection here. That's terrible. Fix that up. It's just, I was expecting a slightly taller dome, Mr. Architect. Well, how's that? Better? This would be a good opportunity to potentially clone in some things that might get revealed too. So that is a really big stamp tool. Okay, so we might end up seeing stuff down here, so it might behoove me to start patching in some stuff. This will be hard because it's in perspective, but something like this. That stuff. Okay, so really, you have to use your imagination there. But eventually I would patch in all the things that might get revealed. Oh, that is a terrible brush. Let's get right off on that. I patch in all my goodies here. Maybe extend it a bit. Play it safe. Variety there. Okay. Get that approximately where it's going to go. Save this, and we'll take it into After Effects and add the depth. So this assumes a certain amount of knowledge in 3D in After Effects, but let me just very quickly get you there. When you're on your layers modes here for the switches, you pop them over to 3D. At which point they'll now have depth away from camera, as well as things like they'll rotate on axes other than, why is that not rotating? Oh, it's really slow. Wow. See it previewing there? Wow. I really didn't like that at all. All right, let's try that again. So this is my... Part of the fact is that this is set to full. Let's get that down to auto. Sometimes it's best to work with them in pieces here, so let's send the sky way back. Sometimes you have to then scale that up back to its original size, or maybe even a little bit bigger. Let's then send the dome back a little bit, but not quite as far. And then probably that needs to scale back up a little bit so that it maintains its scale in the original shot. And we turn this on and wait. And maybe this, instead of sending it backwards, we'll send it forwards a bit. And of course, we don't want to push it too far because we're actually scaling it, so it'll start to get soft on us. But we could just as well say, let's leave that at 0 and let the camera do the push. So now, right now, we have no camera. But we'll go layer, new camera. That's every shortcut plus C there. That's why I don't remember that one. Press every button plus the C button. And once you have a camera in here, you can hit the letter C, and that brings up your camera tool. And you can see that though it's not updating fast, you get parallax between the foreground and the background. Now, very limited. This is a low-res shot, and don't have a lot of space to move, but the parallax is evident there. So maybe staging a shot like this, I'm just going to do just a little tweak, just a little kind of rotate like that. So to play it safe, I would maybe move the camera in space just a little bit, and that way I'm kind of covered on either side if I start to go off the canvas, as it were. And I'll tell you what, let's do a key position there, and go to the end, and a key position there. You know, even that is probably too much. We start to tell that the there's no parallax between the columns, but it's better than a still by just a little bit. We can also probably apply that little trick to the clouds that I showed. We can definitely scale that back down now because the camera's pushed in quite a bit. Let's add that corner pin cloud gag. Or maybe we don't need to. Maybe since this is now an actual 3D shot, we could do this as a 3D gag. So what I'm thinking about doing is rotating this on the what axis? Yeah, the x-axis. So now I'm going to have to scale it again, but this is getting those top clouds are closer than the bottom clouds are. So we get sort of a blanket on top of the shot, which is good. And maybe I can position it. All right. It doesn't quite work. I think the corner pin trick works a little bit better. It gives the illusion of much more movement without having to go quite as large on the scaling of it. So let's get that scale back a little bit. Now I'll do that corner pin trick. This is a 2D trick, so it's under distort and corner pin. And I can physically move the upper corners out a little bit, and then I'll keyframe those and move them over the course of the shot. Anytime you want to bring up an animated keyframe, you can hit the letter U on the keypad, and that will give you any keys that you've added to a shot. Save you some time. So we'll do a little bit of that and a little bit of that. And now, theoretically, the clouds are moving in a way that's parallel to the shot, but separate from the camera movement now, give it a little bit more life. And this will take a century to preview for some reason, 1 frame per second. I'll have to probably crash this and do it again. But there you can see the clouds moving, so the close stuff is moving a lot faster. And now I don't have that ground moving like I was doing before. So that's a 2.5D shot. Now, let's fix Gladys's problem with the lighting next. So this is lighting in 3D is fun. This actually might make the shot look really good because right now it doesn't. But what we'll do is first I'll just drop in a spot just to show you that I think this works. So spotlight, bang, and okay, so there it's working. For some reason, it is not working on all layers equally. Like right now, layer 1, the sky is not receiving it. So let me show you where you turn those things on and off. So first of all, as we rotate this around, we should see, and we can change where it's going. I'm a little, there it goes. You can also change its position. So here in the preview, you can see it working a little better. And now it's working in the background. So I'm wondering if the light was just not oriented in the right direction. Spots are, it's very easy with a spot to not be pointing at the right thing. So I would get in with your rotates and start to dial things around until you see something happening. Like it might have been pointing the wrong way or something. You should never need an ambient in there. Now, what an ambient gives you, should you decide to use it, you can change that type of light. Your light types are here. Parallel is like a directional in Maya. Spot, just like it sounds. A point light is an omnidirectional light. That's the one I like to use the most. And then an ambient light. Ambient light might be nice if you want to just add a color cast to everything equally. So now everything has that. If I want to dial that down, so boom, I've got a base light going. So that can be nice if we then come on top and start adding, like, let's add a point in the foreground that's like an electrical light. It's a little golden, and it's pretty low in intensity, and maybe it has, let's see, fall off. Hoping that the scale of it's right. Right now it's not casting any shadows. That's something that we can control under light options. So in fact, it says that it's casting shadows. Shadows are consensual in After Effects, meaning that the layer can decide not to have interaction with that shadow. So what it does in that case is you have to turn on for each of those layers to say it will cast a shadow. So for example, my foreground layer right now doesn't have any. It's not casting any shadows, but I want it to. So I'll go to the material options and say shadows on. So now it's casting it's casting a shadow back onto the sky, which is unusual for architecture. And also that the distance of fall off for that light is too dramatic. So I can start to dial that down. So now it's just casting a shadow onto the dome behind it. And I can control the softness of that shadow with diffusion. And I probably don't want to dial up. It's trying to calculate it. There it is. And in this case, my shadow color is the ambient infalling light color, but I can also blacken it. Get something like that. And then where you put that makes a difference for what kind of shadow it's casting, which is pretty neat. So I would consider relighting. It gives you a pretty 3D effect fast. So if your image also has light in it, motivated, like I paint a little like lamp post there or something to drive it, that obviously helps a bit too. So I need much more dramatic fall off like that. Yeah. See, the dome is still physically too close. It's always that light's always gonna affect it. Let's see if I can dial down the radius. Yeah, there's an example of the radius, and then I'll maybe fall. So a little better. So that's pretty neat. Let me show Vanishing Point again, and then I'll show it in the service of combining two projects, because that gives you a lot more flexibility. If the stuff that you want to combine is not in the same shot, this can get you there. So let me find some assets here real quick. I think it's up here. Okay. This is a very high-res shot, so give us some stuff to work with. Again, the filter area is where we're going to find Vanishing Point. And it's the initial laying in of the first plane that makes a big difference. So I'm going to go with this pretty prominently featured building here. And I'm going to try to line up my initial selection, boy, it doesn't like it, with as much as I can with the architecture that I see. Really hate, there we go. So anytime you see the blue lines popping on, that means you're pretty happy. These are, the grids are very close together, probably a little closer than I want. So that's something that you can dial in later. You don't want it to be too dense, because then that model is going to be a really strange size when you get it into After Effects. All right. So for a building like this, there is some depth between this face and the face behind it, but I'm going to just make this one piece. Now I could, if I wanted, pop this piece out like this and give it a little bit of an angle, and then give this piece a straight up too. And each time I'm doing this, I'm making another plane by Command, clicking and dragging, and then Alt, clicking and dragging to spin those guys around. So let's just say this is the only building I want to get out of here. As you build it, you might make your decisions early on as to what faces you need right away. Like, for example, I really need this side, and I could or should have done that a little sooner, but this is okay. I don't quite have the angle there. It's a little more promising. And if I need it, I can just extend it up a little bit, which I will. And I'm definitely going to extend it down to get the rest of that side, like that. So there's a few things that are in front of that building that I don't want, but I'm married to them because they're going to be part of this image. And likewise, I can send a piece off here, which I can dial in to turn into the awning a little bit. So it's not going to be perfect, but it'll be pretty close. Maybe I just then put a piece back like that. And I can't see my handle, so oops. I've painted myself into a corner. There we go. I know I have to swing a piece forward here, so I'll cheat it a little bit. Just tight. All right. Theoretically, this should be parallel to this piece. There's going to be some stuff that I'm missing, so I might have to extend it a little bit. But by and large, I have what I need there. So let's say that's the only guy I need. I will say export to After Effects, and we'll call this a new. What was the name of that building? Kronheims. And okay, so that's going to output a certain number of things. Let's go take a quick look at what that is. So in After Effects, we will import, but we need to do a special import. Let's import VPE, something that you don't find in the regular Command I spot. There it is. And there's my VPE. It's going to bring in the folder, and it's going to bring in a project, a comp. And that comp, I can, okay, so here's a great example of the illusion that it was working, and it physically not making sense in 2.5D. And that's because that initial selection, remember how the grid was really close together? That must have been a very, though it looked right to me, it's a very oblique angle to the camera, so it gave me a very stretched out piece of geometry. So sometimes you're going to have that, and you're better off really just kind of going back. So I'm going to go back here, bring up the filter again, and I'm going to start deleting and try and get that to work better. It's a very tall, long building there. So, all right, minuscule change, but look at how few grid points are on there. I wonder if I need to reset this. Let's take a chance. I'm just going to extend these both up. I'm not going to do anything fancy. I'm just going to try and get it as one chunk there. Letting me export. There it is for some reason. Okay. Let's try that one more time and see if that made a difference. So on Cron 2. It's only 2 pieces, but yeah, a little more accurate proportion-wise, right? Okay, so let's say that I really like that first one that I did. I don't, but I want to actually use it. So I'm going to import it, and it'll have its own composition. Now here's how you combine 3D comps in After Effects. This is not the only reason you might do this. Let's say you had a title and the camera moving around it, and you needed to add 3D particles to the scene, but they needed to be pre-comped for some reason. You may be adding a glow to it or something. So you have a 3D nesting inside a 3D. Couple ways you can do it. Maybe you have a master project where you like how it's initially set up and you want to just keep adding to it. In that case, you're going to take your new guy, drop it in, And you're going to have something like this. It's going to sit there as a 2D blob. So step 1, set it to 3D. And step 2, turn that switch on. If you don't have this switch, it's not really 3D. It's just a 3D plane sitting in 3D space. So look at the difference. Here it is. It's just a flat card. I'll tell you what, just to make it obvious, I'll put a solid on here so we know which building we're looking at, since they're the identical color. Shoot. That's the adjustment layer. I want to color it in some way that you'll be able to tell which one it is. Okay, the red building. Okay, so you can see that the red building is just a card sitting in space until we click this switch. And now it's 2 shittily oriented cards, but it is 2 cards. Now, what we'll probably find is that it's not where we want it to be. And that's because with the Vanishing Point, it's based on trying to figure out where the camera was. And it places a camera based on your guesses when you place those initial planes. So in order to move this, let's say I want to move it next door so it becomes its own building, I have to take this guy and repo it in 3D. So it can be challenging. Well, let's say I want to send it back a little bit. Maybe I want to rotate a little bit. But because it's 3D, I'm building a little, backlot. And now I can change, since my composition was was formerly based on the shape of the original image, I can come in with more of a camera shape and start to shoot that. So there they are. This is where it gets a little crazy. These are pretty close. I didn't have to go hog wild to reposition this. They're fairly close in relation, but if I hadn't, it'd be a pretty funny looking set. But imagine doing that for a couple of buildings that you like, combining them, throwing a sky behind it. Maybe you have a multi-layer sky, so clouds are going, a plane goes by, something. I think if you look at the ground on a shot like this, it's really hard, because everything needs to sit on the ground plane. And eventually there's going to be something that breaks that illusion. So something like a lamppost is perfectly flat. It doesn't look like a cylinder sitting on the ground, so the illusion is broken. A car is going to be fucking terrible to try to do. So I would look for shots that you're looking up at the sky, and it works great. Or you're very far away from the object and the parallax doesn't matter too much, such as you're up in the upper levels of a skyscraper doing a little bit of this. That ground stuff is just going to look flat anyway because it's so far away. So the magic of parallax is the farther something away is, the less it will appear to move opposite things in the same space. Whereas things that are really close, and here I am, Ashley, you're moving parallel to the back wall a little bit, but this speaker is moving a lot with my camera, my twin cameras, my twin myopic cameras. So we'll do the same thing. We'll do it in a shot. We'll do it in a shot that's shaped like a camera, 1920 by 1080, 1280 by 720, something like that. And 4 or 5 seconds. Get clever with what's moving. You could get footage in here without too much challenge. Something like a person walking on a balcony. You could just comp in from a shot. So these have the potential to be on people's demo reels. Sam. Sam graduated a little while ago, had one that he did in this class for that project, and it stayed on his reel all the way to the end. It was kind of a mansion, a little tilt down on a mansion, and it was pretty good. I mean, like there was some foliage in the foreground that was boxy, but past that it looked pretty good. You never saw, windows are tricky because you should be seeing moving reflections on them. So windows are bad, nature is bad, and that really is everything that we typically look at in these shots, but you can find ways to kind of fake it out. Daytime stuff looks a little better. You maybe get super shiny architecture. Try to rule that out. Architecture that has a lot of curves, you should rule out. But boxy stuff, flat stuff. It can even be an interior. I've seen this done with like a hallway, and it looks very convincing. So any kind of photo that lends itself to a boxy reproduction and a camera move through it is valid for this. So, questions? It's a lot to take in. I did record it, so maybe